Hello and welcome to the Sideline Live podcast. My name is Orla Keeling and I am the host of the podcast, where every week we bring you a brand new episode with guests ranging from Olympic champions to local heroes, coaches, support staff and anybody involved in the world of sport. Each week we will dive into different topics, including current affairs in sport, identity, skill, mindset, coaching, and also shine a light on those flying under the radar. So tune in every week for brand new episodes, new stories, and new insights you've never heard before. Okay, delighted to be joined by Shane McEntee. Shane, thanks a million for joining me on the podcast. A big weekend for Meath football.
Yeah, big weekend, Orla. Thanks for having me on. There's been really good excitement the last few months, really, with the lads ever since that Dublin result in particular. So, yeah, I think you'll have a big crowd up in Croke Park tomorrow, and justifiable underdogs. But I think there's a quiet bit of confidence about it.
Is this a team that kind of been bubbling under the surface a bit, or is it a lot of pieces come together at the same time?
Yeah, I wouldn't say bubbling. I think it's kind of coming together a bit. Like there's been a lot of work done underage, I would say, in Meath for a good while. For a long time we went strong minor, poor under 21 or 20, which obviously isn't really the right way to go about it. And clearly that wasn't by design, but they've definitely flipped it now a little bit. Whereas maybe minor teams aren't as successful. But the last couple of under 20 teams have been good. Like there was Leinster final loss to a strong Louth team this year, beat Louth in the Leinster final the previous year, and the year before that beaten by a few points by Dublin in the semi-final. So you're consistently competing and bringing players through that way. These fellas are then going and playing a lot of key Sigerson players in the likes of Maynooth, DCU, Kieran Coughlin, I think got player of the tournament this year. Yeah, so I think there's a lot of that coming together. A few key fellas back involved this year. Brian Menton, Seamus Lavin from my own club probably brought a bit more of a balance to the age profile of it, and then yeah, the management ticket this year seemed to really just click and gel with it all. So I think it's probably a few things coming together. Yeah, with a lot of good quality players, to be fair. Definitely more high quality players than when I was able to get a game on it, and I don't say that overly self-deprecating. I think it's just a fact. There's a lot of really good players there at the moment.
And the new rules have really suited me and the guys they have at the moment. Those 2-pointers really suit that group.
Yeah, definitely. They've leaned into it. From my brief exposure in the early, like in the preseason, they went after the new rules very much so. Like there was quite a lot of I don't know, deliberate practice to manipulate the new rules, and I think you'll find a lot of the teams doing well at the moment probably got after that quite early this year, and that might start to even out a little bit. But they've definitely gone after it really well, and you know the Dublin game was probably the real telling example of it. Like a really aggressive kick out press when you have to go long into a wind and almost shoot on sight with high quality shooters like Rory Kinsella come in. This is his first real established year. He played bits and pieces last year, and he can shoot from distance. Connor Duke, similar, Owen Frayne. So yeah, I think a combination of players that are naturally suited to it, and then a really deliberate focus from a coach and kind of setup perspective has definitely bore fruits.
I think Jim Gavin is rubbing his hands together. Everyone's been praising him over the last couple of weeks, but like going back to the pre-season, and I think we've talked a lot with managers and with pundits and people on the couch in terms of the new rules, but what was it like going into a season where the game that you were training for years and so used to had such drastic change all at once? Was it too much at the beginning?
Yeah, my gut feeling on it would have been that it was an awful lot in the one go. And I kind of still feel that to a certain extent, but it's hard to argue with the end product at the moment. It's been very good, with still possibly a few things that I personally tweak. But again, there's always going to be personal views on this. I felt there was so, like, when you read the list of everything, it was a bit overwhelming to be like, how are you going to get to grips with all of this? And my view at the time would have been that if you go with like one or two of the more dramatic ones, like say you're 3 up, even that on its own, I would have felt like that would just fundamentally change the whole game. Uh, and I'm going to contradict myself here because one of the ones that I wouldn't have seen being overly effective to begin with was the solo and go. I was like, well, I don't really see the merit in this, and it's probably my favorite introduction of all of it. So at the time, I felt, this is so much. Do you need all of these changes? Could you? But then without seeing that one as an example in the flesh, I wouldn't have gone for it personally. So look, they were pretty bold and brave with it, and had to take, I'd say, a good bit of flack during it. Um, and in fairness to them, I think they've been pretty good with like tweaking and allowing for it. I know that there's a bit of a view that maybe mid-championship you shouldn't be moving the goalpost, but I think by and large, they've addressed issues that you probably needed to see play out in real time to get a feel for it. So to go back, yeah, it was definitely a lot to try and take on to begin with. Like for example, I kind of came in, I'd gotten married, so I came in and the lads had done a little bit of it. And then the first game or two in training, you're just like they were a bit more settled, and I was a bit bamboozled, just overthinking everything. Like, but then it does sort of ease out. Like, yeah,
I remember I was at the Leinster GAA coaching conference and one of the intercounty refs was there. His name escapes me. He's from Kildare. I think it could be Brendan. And they were doing a Q&A session. And I think I made the point, like, would there ever be a difference between the club and county rules? This was back in, I think it was like February. So the club game hadn't started. And like, all I thought was the referee, like, you're relying on, obviously intercounty, you have the supports around you and the umpires and the sideline officials. But at club level,
yeah,
you don't. And for the likes of the three up, the likes of the 2-pointer as well, like these things can become very grey and these club games can become very hostile. Now, obviously, with the new dissent rules, maybe it hasn't. But like, what's your experience of it at the club level?
yeah. It's definitely different. Like and all my experience so far with club, I'm kind of tempering it that it's not championship yet. It's not the business end. So you can kind of emotionally accept a missed call here and there. And I would have huge empathy for refs with this. The likes of the three up one's so difficult. Like you're turning around and trying to call it in real time. And there's times they've just missed it, and that's fine. Missed decisions happen, in the old rules as well. But I think the difficulty with this one is it directly impacts the scoreboard. Do you know? So like if you concede, obviously there's the option to go for a 2-pointer means some of them are missed, but if you concede a three up infraction and then the ref misses one through no real fault of their own, it's hard not to feel aggrieved because it is a definite point. A missteps call out the field or things like that doesn't necessarily mean, but when it's a 21-yard free, it's a definite point. So there have been a few times where you have to just go, oh, he's missed this. What can you do about it? But as I say, until you're in the business end of it, now look, when it comes to championship in the club, you might have more of those supports, as you say. You might have more. In fact, you will. Like you have certainly with us in senior championship with me, you'll have umpires and linesmen, and that will make a difference. But there's definitely had to be an element of an acceptance that they just can't get all these rights. And similar with the 2-pointers, whether it's on the line inside the arc, the touch from the keepers. I think that's a bit of a funny one. Like I mean, that's the Galway Mayo game was quite a controversial one. How's the umpire meant to call that in real time? And that's with neutral umpires there. So there's definitely a bit of just acceptance. Some of these aren't going to go your way. But by and large, they've been good. And I think what they've done with tweaking the three up one's probably the obvious one that's hardest for refs to call when they're on their own. But what they've done with the tweaking of the rules, where there's that little bit of a buffer zone where you can react and come back in. Most refs I've seen in me have been very good by, if they get the shout, they turn over their shoulder, and your man's making his way, he's sprinting to get back across. If he's any way within a reasonable threshold and hasn't been interfering in the play, they tend just to let it go. And that seems like a good kind of common sense approach.
Yeah, I agree because there's a balance to be struck, particularly when the punishment is so severe in terms of it is
Yeah.
basically a guaranteed point. So when you've got that, and I will say as well, like the players have to get used to it as well. So there is a bit of a kind of trying to find a balance of giving your chance to the referee to get it, but also particularly at the beginning to the players to get it. I did hear a funny thing as well. I was like, yeah, but like senior clubs, that's easy when you have a good ref or whatever. What about the other clubs? And I think someone on Twitter said, sure, Junior B, we've been doing three up for years and no one gave a shit.
Yeah, there'll be some forwards who'll be delighted that they don't have to go back. So there's no chance that they're gonna break it.
I'm hoping they're implemented in the ladies' game for myself. But in terms of the game as well, in terms of the skill level, like what's the difference in the with the new game now compared to the old game in terms of skills? Is there anything the skills wise that have come to the fore that haven't been maybe highlighted with the old rules?
Yeah, it's interesting. I don't think they've necessarily got. I think when they designed these rules, I think they were picturing really particular things, or certainly the average spectator was expecting, like 60-yard kick passes because there's space galore. Whereas I don't think that's coming quite as much. There's definitely more kicking because there's more space, but I think like a lot of coaching outlooks is, well, if we don't give the ball away here, teams have gotten so good at working shots, 14v14, they're probably saying, well, 11v11 here, if we just show a bit of patience and a bit of, creativity in our movement, we'll work a shot here. Whereas if you kick it, you're increasing the risk of giving the ball away. So I don't think there's been quite as much of the long kicking as you'd expect, or as maybe was desired. While it is still come on a bit. Long shooting has obviously been incentivized. Like there's definitely more your risk reward for putting it dead from distance, especially given the fact that you've got rid of the short kickouts by and large. If you're kind of on top of a team, it used to be a bit of a momentum killer to maybe take on a low percentage shot, lose it, and the other team will clip a ball out and walk up the field, and you've lost possession for a while. But now that they have to kick it long, coupled with the added reward of potentially getting 2 points, long kicking is definitely, or long shooting rather, has definitely come into it a bit more. And then on the other side of the ball, again, I don't think it's gone to complete 1v1 defending as people might have envisaged. There's definitely a kind of zonal element to it, but there's definitely more 1v1 instances of defending. Like it's tougher to get. Your teams are still trying to manipulate like double ups, and you're probably covering a man and a half nearly in terms of how you defend, like leaving people out wide and all that. But it definitely has led to more examples of having to defend 1v1, and then I suppose being able to take a fella on 1v1. So yeah, a little bit more 1v1 stuff without it being just a gung ho man for man approach. Long shooting has definitely been incentivized. And then I suppose I was going to say fielding, but I think there's actually probably nearly less fielding, more breaking. And then the winning the breaking ball is of huge importance, especially with that mark rule. I know they've played around with it a little bit again. It's such a disincentive to allow your fella catch it that there's probably more breaking, but then winning the breaking ball is obviously very important.
Yeah. Do you think there was a lot of talk around limiting the hand pass? I thought that was absolutely nuts. I think the hand pass is a key skill of the game, and we're probably in the phase, as you say, of retention and players not want to get rid of the ball. I think the next phase will be kicking. I think we'll go back to it. What were your thoughts if they had brought in a limit on the hand pass? I also think I don't know how an official would do that. What are your thoughts on limiting a hand pass if that comes in down the line?
Yeah, and I don't know graph for that. I think like there still has to be scope for teams to play the game as they want to play the game. One of my fears with all these rule changes were, are you just sending teams out like lambs to slaughter here and you get big mismatches? And I'll accept that I was wrong there because I don't know if it's just by chance the teams are more competitive this year, or if the rules have played into it. I'd say it's a bit of both. So I'll accept I was wrong there. But I think if you go to really prescriptive type of play in a sport where your numbers are your numbers, by and large, there's limited transfers, all the rest. Uh, and you tell everybody, well, no, this is. I think if you go with the likes of a hand passing limit, you're basically telling everyone, no, no, there's one way to play here. Do this, do that, do that. And if it doesn't suit your style, then what do you just go out and lose manfully or whatever it is, but you're playing the game the right way. I don't buy that. So I remember a couple of years ago they went to try it. It was 2019. They went to introduce it for the O'Byrne Cup and the preseason competitions, and it got shot down pretty quickly after that because you kind of just play around it, and people don't think about the unintended consequences. If you've only three hand passes, we nearly let you get to three, and then we back off and go, okay, well, kick the ball here now, or you start doing that. I don't know. I think that's getting way too prescriptive and saying you have to do this, that, and the other. So I have no time for that one.
What are your thoughts on ending a game on penalties?
I was actually chatting about this on something else recently. I'm not mad on it personally. Like I think it's just a bit of a culture heritage thing. It's not really part of our traditional identity, and there's a bit of a traditional element to me. But what I'd say is at the moment with the limitations the split season puts on, like I don't really see what the what the alternatives are. The demands in terms of games, the amount of say Donegal are obviously being vocal enough at the moment with the amount of games they're playing in a very short period of time. I, like, I don't see a window to start putting in replays. the split season brings a lot of good things in terms of certainty and all the rest, but I just fear we might have got the balance slightly wrong. I think there could be a little bit more time to play with here, and I say that with no graw to ever go into fixtures because it's a minefield. I wouldn't wish it on anybody, so I wouldn't be overly critical. But I think if we could buy a few more weeks somewhere, you might be able to mitigate against that. Certainly for provincial finals, semi-finals, finals, something like that. And if you have to bring penalties into a replay, well then, at some stage you've got to finish the game. So I'm not mad on it, but I do feel it's a bit of a we didn't have it before. Penalties have only come in since the window has gotten shorter, I think. Um, so this might be something that we're, as I said on another show before, we're kind of dealing with the symptom and not the cause here a bit, I feel.
Yeah, yeah, I won't get into fixtures. I was even in my head like, how are they going to buy a couple of weeks? I agree. I fully respect the club player, but at the same time, I said it to Joan Keogh, chairperson Kilcook Crokes, on the executive management of the GEA, and I was like, Joan, I live and breathe this, and I don't know when games are on. And I was like,
Yeah,
why? Like, how is that? What's that like for someone that's kind of half in, half out, and you're trying to? I think we need a lot of work on promotion of the game and buying people back into the GEA. I think they've gone elsewhere to rugby and other stuff, but with the penalty then, so you were saying it's more of your traditional view of the game. Should it be free kicks? Or, like, I think of it as, I think it is a skill of the game. If someone's dragged down or failed in
yeah.
the box, it's a penalty. So are you advocating then for maybe a different, like, free kick or something?
No, I think either of those. I'd have a similar view to either of those, really. As I say, I've never because and maybe in a year or two I'll just have normalized this and I won't have these same feelings. But I've never really experienced these. Certainly, growing up, you never experienced a game finishing in this manner in our sports. Obviously, it's been common practice in soccer, and they've introduced variations in rugby and all the rest. So, yeah, I wouldn't see free kicks as a better solution to it either. Uh, it's as I say, it's just something that doesn't sit brilliantly with me at the moment. I feel it's somewhat anticlimactic to be honest. Like that Munster finals, obviously the high profile one recently, and it just felt like a bit of a that's it over now after all the blood and thunder of what had gone beforehand. But again, like it's a personal view on it. Yeah.
Yeah. The the level of basketball influence on GEA is obviously well documented on the pitch. Off the pitch, it's getting more and more. I see references that shouldn't be references, but anyway. And someone recently tweeted that I think it was Shane Walsh. She's like the Steph Curry of 2 pointers now. So one of the things that's gotten quite big in basketball is one on one, 1v1. Is there potential for 1v1 style tournaments, like I think away from the pitch, where you have maybe a prize money and you get a couple of big names, Shane Walsh, David Clifford, and you get to see, like, I love watching the game obviously, but I love watching the one-on-one battles. And I was like, geez, if I could ever get a sponsor and do, like, get a pitch somewhere, bring a load of lads in, like top players, ladies as well, do men's and women's one-on-one, is that something? I think there would be an appetite for it. What do you think?
Yeah, I think like obviously the American sports for years have gone after the likes of your All-Star weekends and the Pro Bowl in the American football, and there's other I suppose skill challenges, kind of like what you're saying here. I think for a while people have talked about like the sort of build up and hype to All Ireland finals, and could we add more elements to that? And I think given what we just spoke about there with the quick turnaround, you're trying to hype up finals back to back. Am I right in saying between the four codes, they pretty much happen one week after the other, or very close
Yeah,
to it?
yeah.
I know that obviously the football and the hurling is week after week, and I think the ladies' football tends to come the
Yeah, it used
following
to
week.
be. It actually was always week on week, but it used to be hurling. Was it hurling, camogie, football, ladies football? Now it's
Okay.
it's hurling, football, ladies football, camogie.
Yeah, so I mean, like if you could introduce something like that with a few other variations off the around the time of the All Ireland final, that could be again. It's probably just trying to break a bit of a culture within the GA. We don't probably don't highlight individualism to the same extent as some of those other sports, but I definitely think there's a scope. Like the Kilmacud Sevens used to be a really big thing as part of the All Ireland final weekend, and it's probably I think the importance of the seriousness of club football has maybe diluted that slightly, whereby teams are possibly not willing to take on the risk of injuries, given that the club championship is starting soon after. Um, so I don't know, something like that. I think there's scope to explore ideas like that. Yeah.
I think sevens could be huge, particularly like we heard a lot about the urban challenges that are going to face the country and especially GAA. Like I think sevens could be big. If you can't field 15, you've got 10, then you've got 7 plus 3 subs. And again, it's a totally different style of the game, and you will see
Yeah.
the likes of sevens rugby, 5-a-side soccer, 3x3 basketball. The smaller side stuff is so exciting. Like it's a completely different game.
Yeah, definitely. And as I said, I think like that so that weekend in particular in Kilmacud has probably just suffered a little bit with that shift in it, but it's always something that appeals to people. And there's they're completely and a different skill set favors different sort of players. And yeah, no, I think a bit of a push on that, whether it's trying to get them in at different times of the year or whatever, there could be scope to grow it that way.
Did you play in a minor Leinster final or All Ireland final before senior game, or was that a different age group?
Yeah, no, we would have in a couple of years actually. 2011 we played the minor final, Leinster minor final, and then 12 we would have played Leinster All Ireland semi and the All Ireland final, and they were all part of the a billing of a senior game in Croke Park. So it was that kind of double header, double header, which is strange. Like you start the game with a low enough number and then finish the game with a pretty big crowd there.
Are we missing that? Do we need to bring that back from your perspective as someone who's done it?
Yeah, look, I think for so many reasons, I think the shift from minor to under 17, there's a lot of things I disagree with that, for a number of reasons. I think that's part of it. I think that's the biggest event I've played in, the All Ireland final. It was my first time actually going to an All Ireland final at 18, and you're in the midst of it. Like it's a huge thing. For as I said, for a load of reasons, I bring it back. I think the main argument was that under 18 minor meant you were clashing with leaving cert. You were trying to balance all of this, but by bringing it to under 17, they brought under 21 to under 20, and now
Then you
like
have more leaving certs at under 20. Yeah.
more, yeah, and the whole under 20 competition is played during the school year. Whereas when we were minor, we used to have now again the split season would have changed this anyway, but we used to have a couple of games. And if you got by, say, the Leinster quarter final, I think it was, there was a significant gap for the leaving cert, and then you play semi final, and then 10 days later play the final as part of a double header. And I think it's had a load of knock-on effects. I think it's a brilliant occasion for young lads, first of all, to get that opportunity. It's really, really special. And the reality with any sort of underage team is, like, it's like a funnel going into adult football. Most of them will not play that level again. Like you've minor teams every year, you're taking the best few from each. So by and large, most of them will not get that opportunity again. For fellas in that team, that was their only times playing in Croke Park, which is the pinnacle, all the rest. And I presume there's an element of trying to take pressure off young lads and all the rest. But this is, you're preparing them for high level sport. Like there's a lot of key measures in it. And then the other side of it, by going to under 17 now, I've certainly noticed it in our club in Dunboyne. We have decent numbers there. So unless you're a top quality 17, 18 year old, who's just finished minor, it's very, very difficult to make that gap or bridge that gap in your first year or so into adult football. And now all of a sudden you're not playing with your mates, you're playing with a bunch of men that you mightn't have as much in common with. And if you're just not even at an ability level, a physicality level, if you're a bit off it, like every year at that age is massive in terms of your physical development. I would say it's been damaging, without any like empirical numbers here. I would imagine it's been damaging in terms of retention, certainly for the likes of us, whereby you keep these fellas in the system for another year, playing with their mates, building up to that, and then they just come out a little bit more ready. Like more of them are finished school, so they're just at a different stage of maturity. They're kind of entering adult life in general. Whereas like we fellas playing with us at the moment, we're playing a game there on a Sunday evening, and one of the lads was like, "Oh, my mum needs me to get home. She's worried I'm not ready for my exams tomorrow." We're like, "What exams? Fifth year exams?" And you're like, "This is mad." Like, I know in ladies football, there's probably always been a bit more of an age dispersion, but like doing fifth year exams, and just they're worlds apart in terms of where they're at in life. So very long-winded answer, sorry, there to
No, not at
yes.
all.
I think the minor and it was always exciting to go in then even as a neutral to Crow Park, and watch the minor and I remember going to watch a Kilkenny Limerick minor final in 2014. Kilkenny were playing Tip after in the senior, and you'd Keane Lynch and a few lads playing for Limerick, and then you're keeping an eye on a few years later. So I think you're missing a trick there, big time. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. I remember I was very lucky. I went to both the football and hurling All Irelands in 2011, and it would have been like obviously 2011 with the football, but then remember literally like being at the hurling, seeing Cormac Costello, Kieran Kilkenny, so many of those lads then come back 2 weeks later and
Yeah, yeah.
playing the football. I don't think they won either, but like you get to see their progression. I remember Kieran Kilkenny playing number 11 in the Vodafone jersey, like playing hurling, and then seeing him in the football, and then seeing what he's done now. And he was a year young at the time. A couple of the lads were as well. But as you say, then you follow the career and you're a bit more invested, and it
Yeah.
kind of brings a bit more of a sense to the game. The other thing that struck me, and player welfare and player load 100% needs to be managed, and I don't think is managed enough even now. Probably just aligned, not correctly aligned, but pre-season competition was a fantastic way for younger players to come in, particularly from a Dublin perspective. You know, I think that's how we find Brian Howard, a lot of the players like that. For lads that are now trying to break into a county panel without the O'Byrne Cup, that's another tall order now that's increased from a couple of years ago.
Yeah, again, I don't know. I think sometimes these like populist movements come about and oh, we need to reduce gains, and it was like you were anti the player if you didn't support getting rid of these preseason competitions. But like the reality is, teams are just playing games. Like they're playing. Nobody's going into to the National League, which has become a really important competition, without playing games in advance of it. And I agree completely. Like there's no replicating uh, playing a game for a county with a bit of a crowd and a bit of a hype. Like you go to play an O'Byrne Cup game, the team's probably released to the media, people come down and watch, whatever else, and it's just more of a gradual progression. I feel into the National League. Yeah, I didn't buy that. I didn't see the overwhelmingly strong arguments for it. In fact, it's possibly become even more difficult to regulate. Like if you were an inter-county manager, not being overly fair with the load. Say, I think Sigerson was always one of the big issues with fellas playing Sigerson at the same time. You can probably fly it under the radar a bit more by having them play a challenge match instead of playing an O'Byrne Cup, McKenna Cup, whatever game, because these games get a little bit of publicity. So, and then this year of all years to bring it in with all the rule changes to me was just bizarre. Like that was, and I know they had made the decision. I think before
Yeah, it was,
all
in
these rules were
fairness.
maybe introduced.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I mean, I don't think it would have taken a whole. But I think there was. I think Ulster in particular, and I know they generate a lot of income off the McKenna Cup, which you can't ignore either. Like that is an important factor of it. It seemed bizarre that they didn't go back on that and say, okay, well let's have these. And I think there was a few mad things in the rules that they were very quick to sort out during the National League. But had you done it in the McKenna Cup with 3 or 4 thousand people at the games, possibly, they would have ironed them out a lot quicker, I think. But yeah, I certainly found it really good. I would have played my first year with Meath, with Mick O'Dowd as manager, and I played a number of O'Byrne Cup games, and there was nerves and there was, a bit of tension, whatever else. But it felt like a bit more of a sense of achievement to have played in those games and kind of survived them and got through them, and you just felt more ready then for a National League game whenever that came.
And I think as well, you made a really good point around, I think, the money as well. Connacht, I know, I released the thing around scholarships. They didn't have as many scholarships now because of not having pre-season income coming in. But as well, like the challenges, like what's to stop a team now from Meath going to Donegal to play a challenge instead of playing in the O'Byrne Cup? And you've got that added element. So you've got a lad that, as you say, could have played Sigerson 2 nights before. Not saying that managements aren't keeping an eye on player load, but they want them to play the challenge. So 2 days later, they're then travelling to somewhere far away from their county instead of doing an O'Byrne Cup close to them. Like it just, and I think when we're talking about expenses, then so then you've got expenses for mileage then and the bus and everything going to outside the province, say for a game. Like it just doesn't really align in my head of like, and I fully understand the player welfare, but then I look at the training ban. And I look at from a physical capacity point of view, if you're going into the league, you have in the ladies' game you had 6 weeks to prepare from your first league game to the date that you were allowed to train. I'm not saying counties broke this, but for like a player can't be prepared for inter-county conditioning in 6 weeks. So I think the training ban, I think it's right, but I think the timing of it is incorrect. So if we're going to go from November, which I think is a good window, why is the league in January? Like it just doesn't, especially when, as you say, it has so much influence on the championship.
Yeah, yeah. Look, I think, and I don't want to make any accusations here because I'm sure people are making informed decisions on that. But I'd agree, like that's a very short window to get yourself up to the demands, and especially now, as you say, with the volume of games you have to play thereafter. Like it's very difficult to get the the work done once you get into the swing of the season. Um, so with that, I mean, with that training ban, like I don't want to accuse any counties of breaking
Well,
it, but
Andy
I
Moran
think
said they went back to the gym in July. Like that, literally, he said that at the end of last season. So that just shows in terms of some counties not doing it, and that he literally said that. So
yeah, and at least he's not lying to us, like you
yeah,
know, it's so no, I think that's, and again, I don't know if this is a cynic in me, you can't get paid travel expenses as a player outside of that window, so I don't know if this is just a way of, so if any counties happen to be back a little bit earlier than that, you know, the expenses are paid out through a pool between, I think, like Sports Ireland. I think there's a number of different contributors to it, but there's no expenses available for anything the far side of the training ban. So sometimes I wonder, is that part of the reason as much as anything else? Because it's just it doesn't make sense to adhere to it if you're trying to prep for that. And then I suppose your point about like why do we start the National League in January? Again, without getting too bogged down, it goes back to the weeks we have in the calendar with the split season. Yeah. So I won't keep labouring that
yeah, we could
point.
be here forever. One thing I actually talked to Andy Moran about when I interviewed him. This was back, I think it was nearly 2 years ago now, and we were talking about going all in as a footballer. And he said he
Mm.
because we were talking about finding balance with football and life and stuff, and he was like, well, to get to the pinnacle of the sport and to be the best you can be, I love that term, you have to go all in on football. So like, what's your experience of that? Did you go all in for a couple of years on it?
Yeah, I'd say I would have. Yeah, I'd say I was a bit slower to get to it. Maybe I would have always liked training and been pretty disciplined, and then would have probably trained harder than most when I was younger. And then went to college for a few years and probably didn't train as hard as I thought I was training, or at least maybe kept training at the same rate, thinking that that was still enough. But yeah, there definitely would have been a time there. So I part of my job in the Defence Forces, I joined via route that involves going to third level if you didn't have your degree finished. So I'd never finished my degree before I went in. So I had a couple of years there where the Defence Forces were paying for me to go to UCD to do social science. And for some of my peers who this is their first time going to college, they were going to enjoy themselves. You know, during the college year, you're by and large a full time student with good perks of living in a barracks, fees paid for, you're on your salary. So it's a more comfortable way of being a student, say. And I saw this window as a chance to just basically be as close to a professional footballer as I could. Brilliant gym facilities in living in Colbrook Barracks, not Mines. Brilliant gym facilities there, brilliant gym facilities and pool facility in UCD. And I just got a way better grasp of how to manage my college load through, I suppose, I worked for a few years at that stage in the Defence Forces. So your time management, everything was way better. And I was like, okay, this is an opportunity now to just be as good a footballer as I can be. And I think that it definitely coincided with kind of my better couple of years of performance. So there's no doubt, like career choice. I'd look at some of the other lads who maybe had very physically demanding jobs during the same period, farmers, whatever else, and saying like I just couldn't imagine how they're doing the training that I'm doing with that. Like I could stay on top of all my work, all my college work, and get recovery sessions in. Get this. I wasn't paying a mortgage. Didn't have like other commitments. I could eat the right food, spend money on it. Do you know? And as I said, it 100% coincided with an increased level of performance.
When you were saying they remind me of Paul Flynn, I've heard him speak about it a lot. Again, worked for a couple of years, then went back to college and realised this is where I go all in. What's the mentality like when you're in that stage where is it like people talk about football first and football before everything? Is that literally what it is? It's like, you have, you know, do you want to come out to this thing and the first thing is how will it affect my football? Is that literally what goes on in your head?
There probably is an element of that, yeah. And what I got better at was, I think, having like a job that I really liked. And so during that period, I would have been back to the barracks to do my normal working job during summers and Christmas breaks, whatever else. And I really liked my work. Like I'm really was like really happy with the profession I'd chosen. So it gave a good sense of balance that I could switch off and do other things. But like anything extra you're looking to do, playing golf, anything was okay, well, like, will I be right to train as hard as I'd like to train after walking 4 hours that day? Yeah, there's definitely every, if I go to this, and even if I'm not maybe having a few drinks, am I going to sleep as much? Am I going to? It definitely does come in when you get into that sort of obsessive mindset. It factors into pretty much every decision you're making, which mightn't always be the healthiest. As I said, I think I had another outlet in my work there that gave me a bit of a focus at times. But yeah, no, you 100% try and make pretty much every lifestyle decision around it. And I don't know, people say that that's too much, but like you're competing with someone for a jersey first of all, and then if you have the jersey, you're competing with another team to win. So you can accept that it's too much and say, you can't be doing that. But you know, that's the nature of competitive sport. Like you're trying to do as much to be as good as you can. Like
I heard someone speak about that recently, and they were like, hey, people say to them, "Why do you do it, and how do you do it?" I think it was a GA player, and they said, "Well, this is what I enjoy. Like it's actually
yeah,
like I get the sense if I had handed you another opportunity to do something else that wasn't spur up for me in that period, you probably would have said no."
yeah. No, I think like for years there, I remember a couple of years ago there was a bit of talk about like restricting the amount of contact hours with teams, and you can only train 2 times a week. And I'm going like you're again, I think you're playing to a bit of an audience here saying, "Oh, this is only amateurs too." So there's loads of amateur sports that train exceptionally hard and harder. Like we can get a bit self-indulgent, I think, sometimes. Like we're the only people that do this and we don't get paid. And I suppose because the game attracts an audience and crowds, and it can to people from the outside, it can seem a bit bizarre. But like, I work with fellas that are like good national level boxers, runners, cyclists. They're doing all the exact same amount of training hours, and probably more, like really, and being more disciplined because in the likes of those individual, particularly endurance-based sports, like there's no scope for, okay, I'm a little bit off it here, but I'll think my way through the game, or my buddy beside me is gonna dig me out. He'll cover, like, so it is like there's obviously multiple factors. There's the camaraderie, there's the pride of place, there's all this, but you're also dealing with like driven people who want to be able to test themselves. Gaelic football happens to be the vessel that they are testing themselves to be the most disciplined, driven version of themselves. And there was definitely a way for a while there on the GPS stats and the nutritionist and the psychologist, and I was there going like, yeah, this is great. Like if again, if I was someone competing at that level in another sport, I could be spending a fortune on all these things to improve my performance. Whereas I used to go down to Dunganny a couple of times a week, and they're there waiting for you to engage and use them. Like we remember uh, Killian O'Sullivan, he's still with me, and I played with him for a long time, kind of making this point to lads like younger fellas coming in or maybe a bit unsure about how to avail these things, making it very clear to them even from a financial perspective, you are saving a fortune having all these expertise available to you. Use them. Like it's an incredible opportunity for people to. Does it bring pressures, and like is there times where you're going, geez, I could do without this? Obviously, yeah, but I mean nothing's perfect. Like it's the pros. I think the pros in an environment like that 100% outweigh the cons.
I love that as well because it is a personality that and a type of character that plays intercounty elite level football or hurling. And as you say, it's the vessel that we see them in, but they would probably be doing it. Like we've a lot of type A characters now with the level that
Yeah.
GA's gone to, and we see a lot of people like Shane O'Donnell, I think is the perfect example.
Mm.
Someone that we see in a hurling capacity, but he's a complete genius and he's a high performer off the pitch. And obviously, it's been well documented his attempt to go to space or his campaign
Yeah,
as
yeah.
a first hurler of the year to go to space. That's a great point around what Keane was saying to the lads. Like, how important is that kind of that influence of leadership and older players on new guys to come to the setup and them embracing the experience that is it being an intercounty footballer?
I think it's massive. Like as I said earlier, when I was younger, okay, I wasn't in an intercounty setup, but I thought all the work I did to be like a good minor footballer, like just keep doing that. That's good enough because you have to be exposed to the other behaviors to I suppose see it and realize. So when I was then brought in with the Meath team, you're looking at fellas like Donald Keogan and how they're preparing, and you're going, okay, well that's not the there's levels to what I thought was working hard and preparation and all the rest. And Especially if it's coming from the established fellas there. It has such a multiplier effect. Some of it could be spoken, like as I said, what Killian like literally spelling it out to the lads. But some of it's just unspoken and acknowledged based on what you're seeing around you. And going back to the me thing earlier, like I think there's a good balance now with the likes of, as I said, Brian Menton's gone back in, Seamus Lavin's gone back in, James McEntee, my cousin, was brought back in. Porrick Harnan went back in at the beginning of the year. I just think a lot of that, and not all of them are getting huge game time, but they're there living the kind of lifestyle that you'd expect of seasoned inter-county fellas. And what I found myself then was just your general learning as you went on is massive. Like my understanding of what fueling myself for training or for matches just developed over the years with more conversation with the nutritionists, picking the brains of other fellas. So I wasn't deliberately doing the wrong stuff when I was younger, and I might have been getting a lot of it right. But then with just a bit more knowledge and experience, it gets better and better and better and better and builds on it. And I think one of the biggest challenges for teams over the last number of years making a breakthrough was keeping squads together long enough to kind of, I don't know, amass all that knowledge and experience because there's a number of teams probably out in front, and I think like Leinster counties are the prime example. The turnover you would have seen in squads there was off the charts, like, because trying to see the light at the end of the tunnel to get something was very difficult. And then you're getting a fella year one, year two, they're making strides, and they go, "Oh, here, do you know what? There's other things I'd like to do," and I don't blame them. Like there's a lot of different options in life, and choosing to live this sort of lifestyle restricts a lot of what you can do elsewhere. So there's no right or wrong here. But if you're trying to bridge that gap, it doesn't happen in. People think like, "Oh, we put in a big preseason here, we're at it." It's years and years building up on it, like from S&C, from game smarts, nutrition, all these sort of things that you just amass. And I think the best example of a team that managed to do that was Armagh, and obviously there was a culture of huge buy-in there without huge reward for quite a long time, and there's no guarantee you get results, but in their case they did get the big prize.
We were talking before we recorded about how you've gone into commentary and media stuff, and you're always fascinated by game plans and stuff. And while you mentioned the professional supports in terms of nutrition, S&C, where does that level of understanding and learning come from as a young player, as you say, accumulating the years, but from a game plan, a tactics perspective? Where do you learn that?
I think some guys are a bit more, I don't know, there's like a natural aptitude for it, all right, but then there's definitely just it's like studying anything, I suppose. There's definitely just an hours and a work rate thing. We had brilliant analysts with me, Shane O'Brien and Dylan Heavey for a while as well. And they would have put an awful lot in with like the level of stats and feedback they give you between the like cutting the videos and then just figures. And I maybe a bit sad, like, but I was really interested in it, really interested. So I break down my game based on that, and some of it has to be feel. It can't be all stats and metrics. But I put big weight in that because it allowed you to maybe coldly analyze your game a little bit better, not get caught up in the emotion of what you've read online or what you've someone said to you. Like, as I say, stats aren't everything, but it gives you something to actually compare this game to the next game. So I think just putting in genuine hours with it and like having the guys who are actually able to break it down for you. And then I just would have given time and read it, like, and I would have done my prep, my video prep. And I also realized I'm not the most naturally gifted here. So if I'm gonna be half decent, these are all wins that I can get. And you look at pro sports, and they put a lot of weight on it, on your pre-match analysis, your post-match. So personally, I just put in hours and hours. I think that definitely helped. Like if you're physically seeing patterns before a game or after a game, you'll identify them a lot really by sitting down with your laptop, whatever. You'll identify them as they're happening on the pitch in front of you. If you're One thing I used to go after was like the possession count. We certainly in the old rules, there'd be a lot of that over and back, swinging the ball, whatever. And I was playing centre back, so I was getting a lot of possession, like really high possession count, because we go down the wing, not on, come back, give it to me in the middle of the field, and I'm unopposed. So I could be a great lad and get, there was games where you might have like 40 possessions and look like the right fella. But what the stats team started doing then was breaking it down into positive, negative, and neutral possessions. So and they had criteria for each. And it was basically positive, you're making something happen, negative, you're giving the ball away, neutral is just a safe sideways pass, whatever. So I decided I can't just get 40 possessions and do nothing with it. And I have to accept that if I'm trying to be positive, there's going to be some negative. So I basically worked it out. If I have a ratio of 3 positive possessions to every 1 negative, I can live with that. Or sorry, above 3 to 1, I can live with that. So if I put 7 good kick passes into full forward line that stick and we get something out of it, and I give away 2 in the meantime, okay, I can live with that. And that was just a personal thing of trying to utilize the data and the information that was given to you. So then you start looking at, well, what are the negative passes? Where were they going wrong? Was it when I was trying to, kick it left footed down the left side back into the crowd or whatever? You just start to see patterns and go and make a few takeaways from that as opposed to with regards to how you can play it better.
Yeah. So is that you working with the and in collaboration with an analyst, or is that you taking their data and then breaking it down even further on your own bat?
They would have given us all of that off the bat, like, and then you could probably go and pick their brains off a few other bits, and they put good video footage together for you if you wanted to compile it. They would have used different softwares that were quite interactive that you could do a good bit of it yourself if you wanted. They'd segment all your clips into your positive possessions, your negative, so you could start to see patterns yourself. But they were always really good. Like I said I was maybe a bit nerdy with it. They're definitely very nerdy with it because this is their gig. Like, they're obsessed with it and they're so good at it that they were only delighted if you went and engaged that. And then you bring that to the coaches and say, well, like, look, we'd like to Colin Ali, would go to him and say, well, look, this is kind of happening. I'm seeing some numbers here. This is happening repeatedly. Like, what can we do to make that more common if it's a good thing, or less common if it's a bad thing?
Yeah, I think the analysts are the unsung heroes in the management group. I will actually. I remember I had a guest on again 3 years ago now, but it really struck a chord. He mentioned a study. His name is Donny Fox, and he said there was some study in America where they took a group of players that would watch a lot of sport, and he said the key. I said, "What's one of the keys to be successful?" And he's like, "Well, you have to watch your sport," because there was some sort of study where they'd have a photo of it was a field sport game. I forget what it was, but like they would have the photo, but they would remove the ball from the photo, and they would get the athletes to pinpoint
Yeah.
where they thought the ball was. And I'd love to see it in G. Like, imagine, like, how do I read the high catch where they remove the ball and you can tell by the hands and the extension of the arm and the head where the ball could be. And he said the players that had watched a certain amount of video were bang on every time compared to the players that didn't. So I'm suppose I'm confirming your point around seeing the patterns on the pitch versus not seeing it.
Yeah, 100%. And like, even just again, maybe something that I took to naturally enough. Like, I was just around football all the time. My dad would have played into his 40s, so I would have been up at Dunboyne training matches, 3 times a week, as well as my own. So just watching and talking to him in the car home, and then he managed a couple of teams after, and I'd traveled a lot to those. And you're probably, without realizing, like, it becomes your biggest interest. So like, I say the games now at the weekend, a couple of the last few me games, the lads have gone for a good bit of crack, and I just wouldn't be able to do that. I'd have to sit there and watch and try and work out something, try and understand what's happening and why it's happening. Like, and again, it's probably just a life of being exposed to that. Like,
You have a life sentence. That's what I call it whenever there's a family involved in sport.
yeah,
Um,
yeah,
I do want to ask you. You brought it up there, and as someone that my dad coached me for a number of years, and anyone that I always have more respect for players that are coached by their parents because it's tricky. It's a tricky balance. What was that like having your dad as your intercounty manager?
yeah. It was. It definitely brought challenges in a few ways. Like, you've been naive to think it doesn't open you up to a bit of added scrutiny and criticism, and I kind of had to just accept that early. Um, and then trying to maybe park stuff football wise when if you're at home would have made it difficult too. I was probably lucky in a way I didn't really live at home during that time, and some of that was a conscious effort just because you can just have a bit more separation. So yeah, it definitely brought challenges, but then it brought perks too, and that, like, in a very simple factual thing, he knew everything that I was good at, like, whereas another manager, but the way, like, having a manager from your club will probably intensify it a little bit more. Like, Dunboyne have had a good few fellas over the last number of years involved with me, and not that none of them are unwarranted, but between Robbie Brennan now, he's adopted a Moy man the last 20 odd years. And when my dad was there, they see more of the good in you naturally. Like, so, there's bits like that. But no, it brought challenges, and it probably brought an added sort of focus on my work rate to make sure I accepted quite early that like you can't control the narrative outside. But I was very confident that I could prove to the lads in the squad that like you're there on merit, and the only way you could do it, not everyone's going to play well all the time. The only way I could do that was like how I carried myself at training and all the rest. So that definitely kept me on my toes that way. But I think that's probably my natural way anyway. But yeah, it helped a little bit. As I said, Mick O'Dowd had me in the previous year for a good chunk of the year, and that helped just kind of ease my way in a little bit. That you aren't just being parachuted in out of nowhere. And as I said, the wider public mightn't have been as aware as that, but I knew the players knew it because I was with them, like, and that was kind of comforting. And then a lot of my age group came through into the senior panel around the same time, so you were very familiar with it with a lot of the players there
Yeah,
too.
that's a good point about the club manager. Even you look at Kildare with Brian Flanagan coming in, just a
Mm.
huge cohort of that under 20 group he's had over the last couple of years. So,
Yeah,
and even like, because I remember I listened to, or it was an article you did, or something on Off the Ball around wanting to be, being asked to be captain, and you were very conscious of the optics of it. And then it was kind of like, talk us through, there was a couple of people that you had conversations around it, and you obviously assumed the role then as captain, but like that was something you were very conscious of, the optics of it all.
yeah. So like we Brian Menton and Donald Keogan captaining for a good few years, and they were like the real obvious standout leaders. So it was kind of theirs until they didn't want it, I suppose. And then one of the years when the championship was finished late, that 2020, so we would have played a Leinster final in November, I think, and then you're into another lockdown, and it's off for a while. And the lads had made contact to say they didn't want to be. So I'd been in a leadership group with a few other lads for a couple of years, like a player voted leadership group for a few years prior to that. And so you were kind of in the conversation, and one of the coaches flagged it with me quite early, and I just shot it down straight away. Um, and then it was kind of brought up again, and the line was, well, if we start making our decisions based on what people outside think, then are we making the right decisions? And I was like, yeah, that's a pretty fair point. So just kind of again talk to one or two of the more senior fellas, and they were all very in support of it. And yeah, I was kind of like, well, look, if you were younger, you'd never imagine turning this down. And I think at that stage, I'd got established enough in the team, and very sure of, you know, I always kind of felt you'd be very quick to read the room if people felt you weren't up to it, from a playing perspective or whatever else. So yeah, after a while, and I think because we had that lockdown period, there was a good bit of time to think about it and trash it out, and decided to go for it. And yeah, it was. I'm glad I did now, because you say it's a unique enough opportunity. Ronan Jones has done it since from Dunboyne, but I don't know how many Nigel Crawford definitely did. Like, there's very few Dunboyne people would have done it, and whatever about the nice honour for yourself, like for your family, your close friends, your club. It is definitely a nice touch
What does
that
the
way.
leadership group do? Give us an insight into that. We hear that word a lot going around.
Yeah, yeah. Well, there was one year in particular, as it just so happens to have been our best year when I was involved. It was very, very active. So we had a guy called Peter Nolan in working with us, who would have done. He's basically like a kind of management leadership consultant in his private life, or in his professional life rather. And he's a Meath man, and he came in and did a lot of work with us. So players would have voted in. We did a workshop pretty much where Peter had the whole squad verbalize what are the characteristics and traits you think a leader in this group should have. Got the most common ones up on the board, and it was right. Okay, pick three, four names. So then straight away, I've been in ones before that were kind of like handpicked by the management, and the credibility is a lot less. I think what basically Peter did there was have the team pick who they are and why they are considered leaders. So Peter would have done regular meetings with us, at least once a week, possibly more. Maybe review the previous week, feedback bits to the management. It kind of acted as a vessel where you could feedback from the players, maybe identify players within the group that could do with an extra bit of support, whether it's from a leadership player as opposed to just management, and again, because of the manner in which it was selected, you kind of developed an element of credibility. might have started taking the lead on some of the video review, just a lot of things like this I suppose maybe dissolve all the power down from the three or four management team that would stand at the top of the room. It just shared the voices and gave a little bit more responsibility to the wider playing group, particularly the players in that leadership position. But then it also trickles down to, okay, us as players have a voice to be heard here, and every member of the squad felt heard a little bit. So that's a lot of it. But then the big thing, that's kind of the structured stuff. The big thing was like, okay, you're considered this now, so you have to be like squeaky clean in terms of how you train, play, perform, interact with other people in the squad to set that sort of standard and give you the credibility to maybe identify when others weren't doing it.
I actually came across Peter at a team thing. They were doing a one-off, and I was there, and he did a session. And it was great. So I'm interested that you mentioned him. But even like as a captain, then how does a leadership group support you, or who do you go to as an outlet when you're a captain?
Yeah, so Killian O'Sullivan, I've mentioned him a few times now. He was vice captain. The two of us were the same age and very close with one another, football and just friendship as well. So he was the vice captain then when I went in, and he ended up taking over from me thereafter. And he was probably a big one that I don't think you can have too wide a circle with it, or else you're going to get too many opinions. But someone who could be pretty blunt and honest with you if there was something that you wanted to pick their brains. So he's one I would have gone to. And then just, I suppose, sometimes it can be small little things, like having a WhatsApp group, be like, look, management are suggesting this, it's a slight change in our schedule. What do we think? Grand. And then at least there's a level of management might see things from purely their perspective and not consider the implications to the players. So having just small little channels of communication there, that I'm not making a decision on behalf of everybody here. I'm making sure that this is the common feeling of the group. So it could be informal, it could be like structured sit down meetings, or it could just be like a phone call to somebody. Just as I say, maybe just to reassure, this is what I think the playing group would like here. Keep me in line here. Am I going off? Am I going way off track? Like,
Yeah, you have a unique experience as well in the Defence Force. You've mentioned a couple of times. So when I mention the word leadership, what does that mean to you?
um, I'd go back to one element of kind of the answer I gave there earlier. It's just about, I think it's about like a consistent approach to your behaviors in a group. So um, again, when I was having some of those conversations with various management teams about various members of the management team about taking on the captain role, one of them gave me a really good line. I'd taken it on at this stage, and he said, "You're the captain because of how you behave. Don't start behaving a different way because you're the captain." And I think that's so true in leadership and all sorts. In the workplace in particular, the my last, I've just finished up kind of 2.5 year stint in the cadet school here. So you're training the kind of inductees that are going into leadership positions. So they have a 1.5 year induction course to go out and be officers in the Defence Forces. And what you're trying to really sell them the whole time is like, okay, well, when they walk off the square after the commission ceremony, they're a lieutenant. So people are going to salute them and they're going to call them sir and ma'am. But that doesn't necessarily make them a leader if they don't behave accordingly. Do you know? So being captain of a team, yeah, okay, you might have something added by your name in the program, but it's about how you actually behave on a consistent, regular basis, and bringing that level of consistency. Because leaders are going to make mistakes. Like, they're not going to get everything bang on perfect. But if you're consistently, I suppose, applying yourself for the betterment of those that you're in a position to lead, then you're going the right way about it.
So when the phrase or the question more so than a phrase, are good leaders born or made? What are your thoughts on it?
I'd like to say both, because if it was just born, well, then we're wasting our time in the cadet school there. 'Cause we could shorten that 18-month course very significantly. So no, they're definitely made by. But yeah, look, there's certain people who will have natural characteristics, whether it's like an element of like heroism or bravery, or an ability to like orate and communicate, whatever it is. There's certain characteristics that can lend yourself to being a leader. But then a lot of it has to be made and learned through experiences. And uh, again, I've been really lucky with the career I've chosen, that like so much of what I'm exposed to there, I feel can translate back to the other big passion of my life, which is football. Like so, we do a lot there on you learn to, and again, this is a line that Peter Nolan would have actually used a lot with us, like learn to lead yourself before you can lead others. So like again, just to look at like the sort of the curriculum of the cadet school, it's broken up into four phases, and your induction phase is about like your basic soldiering and learning what it's like to be part of the military and part of a team, and then go into your development phase, empowerment phase, synthesis phase, and it's all about just increasing the level of responsibility that you're exposed to and the level of oversight you're given. So to begin with, it might be very much walk through, talk through, like, okay, you're in charge now, so you need to do this, 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 this. And then as they move through their course, it might be a case of me saying, okay, or you're in charge, this is what I want done, go away and do it. And earlier they might have come and asked you questions and look for guidance, whereas when they get to a level whereby it's, you do it and then we'll review it after.
The other thing I wanted to ask with leadership and with your dad's experience of management, and he gave, I have to say, a brilliant interview in the GA Social. I thought it was fantastic. Has that skewed your view on terms of eventually getting involved in management someday?
Um, no, I'd say it's something I'd be likely to do all right anyway. But even over the last number of years, I'd say from when I was about 22, 23, I'd have given a hand with some of the underage teams in Des Moines, sporadically, like not not being the out and out manager or whatever, but I enjoy that. Like I enjoy the coaching side of it. I don't know whether you'd rather be a modern day coach or manager. There's probably elements to both that I'd like. But I'd definitely be going into that space. I would say hopefully in a few years if my back holds up for a little bit longer. But and again, even like I was briefly outlining my role and work the last couple of years, like there's an element of coaching and teaching in that. So I think it is something that I'd be kind of naturally attracted to doing.
I know we mentioned before we recorded Liam Hogan, a Meath man currently on the
Yeah.
F1 circuit. He got you involved in a Williams kind of pre-season training camp, was it? The Hill of Tower. He gave a bit of a Sean Boylan treatment.
Yeah. He was doing I suppose a kind of training camp weekend with them over in Ireland, and I'd be close with Liam, and he was kind of just bouncing a few ideas off. So I was very much more there, giving a hand as much as anything else. But part of what he wanted to do was bring him up to the Hill of Tara. He'd spoken to them a lot about GA and his background, and kind of what it means being involved in club and county teams at home. So the Hill of Tara would have a bit of like, well, obviously there's major historical significance, but from a GA perspective, going back to Sean Boylan's teams, that was where the slogan kind of I suppose, scientific S&C, that's where the fitness levels were built up. And even up to present day, there'd always be the odd session or two from me teams there to get a bit of hardship in and maybe connect with that side of it. So he was bringing them up there. They've actually since clamped down. We didn't realize they've since clamped down on team sessions. I think just due to maybe the damage can be doing to the ground there. So we were stopped in our tracks going up, but we still brought them up for a bit of a chat and a walk around, and I just spoke to them a little bit about playing intercounty and the kind of the high performance element that we have, and I suppose the opportunities that they're very much exposed to in that circuit. Now they've probably a bit more going on in terms of supports and all the rest, but yeah, it was really really cool. So trying to get to a race now is the next thing. I haven't been able to make space in the calendar, but it sounds like Liam's going to be there for a little while yet, so I'm sure I'll have plenty of opportunity.
Yeah, definitely. What did you learn from being involved? I'm assuming it's like it was the pit team or something, was it?
Yeah. So it was like the garage team. So both the pit stop, and then you would have had the fellas who the IT side of it, who set up the computers in the garage. There was a wide scope, and then some of the managerial level of it there. So it was really interesting. Like they're coming from, I suppose, technical backgrounds. They're in a sport, but they're not in a sport because of their sporting prowess necessarily. But you know, teams are teams. Like whether it's in a corporate gig or sporting setting, or I suppose a support team to sporting performers, as is the case with these. And it was interesting because I haven't really had a huge exposure to professional sports. So you kind of sometimes wonder, does the does the pay maybe dilute the passion for the team that they're in? Like, is that just only natural? And it was very, very evident and very clear that they were quite passionate about the organization they were representing. I would be a massive F1 fan before this. I'm getting into it a bit more now, but Williams traditionally would have had would have had quite a lot going on and maybe gone through a bit of a lull. And again, that was one of the things Liam was maybe trying to connect from like a Meath perspective, that there's quite a strong heritage there, and maybe not as successful as we'd like to be in the last while. So there was it was interesting to see that. And what was really interesting as well, I listened to a podcast just before that with James Wells, the team principal, who he had come in from, I think, oh, I'm going to embarrass myself. He was number two, possibly in Red Bull, but one of the big teams of the last number of years. And it was so clear from that he was like tearing up the script here. He was like, this is a chance to reinvent everything we're doing, be really brave, really creative, go after everything. And I think part of Liam's role there, maybe tied into that a little bit. I don't want to put words into fellas' mouths, but you could feel sometimes. I think it's very easy for fellas at the very top to have all these ideas and principles and talk about we're going to do this, that, and the other, and it doesn't filter right the way down to like the cold face. Whereas I think these guys who are very much at that, I got a sense of them that they were very ambitious and driven about, okay, this is an opportunity to change this. And I think the results so far this year have backed that up massively. I think they've within the first couple of weekends, they amassed more points than they had the previous season. Getting multiple points off their two drivers, a lot of things that just hadn't been the norm for the last few years. So it was really interesting to see that same sort of like team collective buy-in. And there was, they did a lot of work on like, just your general culture workshops, and fellas were passionate about where they were going with it. Like,
I saw Paul Kilgannon and Bernard Jackman were there, and now Paul is now a performance coach as well with Williams. I was chatting to him very briefly there a while ago. Like, there is a bit of an Irish influence now in the F1. There's another guy, Patrick, forget his name. He was on the Finding Mastery podcast. I'll send it to you. He was excellent. Do you think, I get the sense from chatting to you here, and I've chatted to a lot of people, performance coaching might be something that you might tick the box in at some point. But I think from your background, and even I think if there was a manager listening now that had maybe young leaders, some sort of leadership coach role would fit your experience.
yeah, no, it's definitely something I have a bit of an eye on, as I say, given just between like the sporting and then the professional background. And then I'm actually doing a master's at the moment, doing the flexible MBA through Trinity. The GPA have been good enough to sponsor me to do that. And like some of the modules in that, you've executive coaching, and I'm like, yeah, this just clicks with what I'd like to do. So there's definitely is a bit of that I'd like to keep an eye on. I suppose there's no real clear defined pathway into it, but it is something I'd certainly be interested in. I think there's some areas where it's just quite untapped still. Like, when Peter Nolan, as I mentioned, came in and did a bit of work with us with me, like, you're starting at a base. It was like, geez, we haven't done a lot of this before. There's huge scope for improvement on it. So yeah, definitely something I'd be make a job pitch for myself there now. If there's anybody listening that I wouldn't mind dipping my toe into it a little bit.
Brilliant, you're dead right. Well, I ask everyone this question, even people that don't play media, chairpersons, everything. What separates the best from the rest, Shane?
Uh, I'd say it's that obsession. I go back to it earlier, like that real obsession to improve, like, and an obsession over a consistent period of time. Like, we all go through spikes of motivation and whatever else, but I think the very best at their least motivated can maintain, their base level of performance or commitment or discipline, whatever it is, exceptionally high. And I think that's where it comes from. Like, I've mentioned a few times, whether it's in leadership or trying to, make the breakthrough as an intercounty player or as a team, immediate results are few and far between. It's that level of consistent, dedicated approach and probably obsession, really. Like, yeah,
Mm.
yeah.
Mm. When I look at Dublin in their peak years where you would have come up against them a lot, what allowed them to be as good as they were? Like, we look at the players that they have, obviously some of the best players that will play the game, but as a group, what allowed them to be their best?
Yeah, like I think they're really interesting. There's obviously a lot of factors. Like, I think you had a generational group of players there, 100%. But they, for them to not get caught, any good team can get caught on a given day. And I know a few of them, and I kind of picked their brains a bit after the fact. They weren't going to tell me much when we were part of the chasing pack, albeit a bit further down than maybe some of the others. But um, yeah, again, I think just that consistent level of discipline and drive, and like, there's a lot of things that feed into that. Obviously, you can have really good management teams and support structures that drive a culture and keep it going. The level of competition in their squad makes a natural level of competition. You can't drop off. Like, you can't there's very few teams where you could coast by, or sorry, there's very few teams where the best players couldn't coast by and still be included. And I think that that was something that they had, and that's probably a factor of a lot of really good coaching underage, a lot of good setup. So a lot of things came together, and then I would say, yeah, just getting a combination of a really talented and driven bunch of players and the right support structures around them, and just that consistent approach. I spoke to one of them recently enough about like how do they not get caught, and he just said they kind of maintain this level of respect for the opposition and who they were playing, and they seem to be able to keep a pretty good level of humility, which can be very hard done when you are getting this. I think especially with a Dublin, whatever any county like Dublin, capital numbers, they're the most marketable. When you get this level of success, it can be very, very easy for that kind of edge and drive to disappear, or not even disappear, but drop off marginally enough that an incredible Mayo team could catch you on a given day. A really good Kerry turn on. There was teams there like that Mayo team could have multiple Irelands if they're in another generation. So they did obviously manage to maintain this humility that they had to be at their best or very close to it to succeed. And I don't know, unfortunately for us and a lot of other counties, they did maintain that. I wish they didn't, but they did. Like, yeah.
So why you mentioned other players stepping away when you've got maybe trying to find the light at the end of the tunnel with the Leinster Championship. Obviously, it's maybe changed a bit now. Why did you stay, and why? I get the sense you probably relish those opportunities to play the likes of Dublin rather than say throw in the towel and say, "Geez, I could be doing something else."
Yeah, like rightly or wrongly, every time it came around, I was convinced we were going to beat them. Like, and I can look back now when I'm not involved and say, okay, you were being a little bit ambitious there, but and maybe there was the emotional bit with dad being involved that I felt, well, I have to convince ourselves here we can't. I don't know, but and you grew up and that's what you wanted to. That was all you wanted to do, and I was highly motivated by the fact that like some team is eventually going to beat these here. Uh, how cool would it be to be the ones like everyone remembers that Mayo game, even unfortunately for Mayo, they didn't go on and win the final against Tyrone after. Everyone remembers that game. And we played them in Leinster semi-final a few weeks previous to that and had them right on the ropes going into injury time. And they were obviously good enough to kick on and pull through. But it was that motivation that like, oh, I want to be, someone's going to do this. I want to be the ones to do it first. So maybe some of it was misplaced and foolish, but as I say, it's all you grew up on. Like if you grew up, in a football family in Meath, that's what it was all about. And then say in Dunboyne, you're nearly fighting for your identity a little bit there with being so close to Dublin, and you get a bit of stick around other parts of Meath of as to being an extension of Dublin, whatever else. So there was loads of factors, and as I said, I enjoyed the challenge of every time you're going out to play. Like I was playing go through those games. I played midfield, and you're going, okay, well, I'm either going to be dealing with uh, Michael Darmacoli, James McCarthy, Brian Fenton. There's no there's no easy roles here, like so. But there's a good personal challenge in that, like, and some of those games I would have felt I'd acquit myself well, which despite maybe the disappointing losses, you still have your own individual motivation. Like, okay, well, I prep as well as I could for that game from the beginning of the season, and you went out and you competed as best you can against as ultimately what's the best team there's ever been, like, and some of the best players.
When you give us for people that are, and I was probably asked you before we recorded, are you still playing? Because there was no kind of announcement if you were retired or not. Just for anyone listening that's wondering why you're not with me and they've heard you on GA Go or GA Plus now. What's the story with your football at the moment?
Yeah, so just to maybe give a bit of context, I had I had surgery on my back after 2019. It's given me a bit of trouble ever since. On and off, I've managed it okay at times, but then 2023, so it was Conor O'Rourke's first year. In the middle of the National League, I was after playing a couple of games, and the following week I was in the gym and my back went again doing a lift, which required a second surgery. Bit of talk about whether it was smart to try and play or not, but the surgeon was good to go and push it. So played club football at the end of that year. Wasn't brought back in with Column for 24. Robbie took over in 25, or sorry, 425 rather, and he gave me a call in the winter to be like, look, what's your story? Are you in a position to play here? And I said, I don't know, to be honest. I don't know how my back would hold up to the load. I have to manage my training, even at club level, modify bits and pieces. So I said I'd certainly like to try because I know like I'm 31 at this stage. I know you're not getting many more chances at it. And the new management team was very exciting. And I knew there was good players coming along. So I went in for about 2 months, spent a lot of that time injured, and then Robbie had to make a cut in the squad, and I just hadn't done enough to stay on. So that's the long version of where I'm at. As I don't necessarily believe in retirements from intercounty, particularly if you're not definitely getting picked. It can be a little bit self-protecting, maybe. You've say the likes of James McCarthy last year. I think that's a justified retirement as such. Whereas the reality was I haven't played a whole pile in the last few years, so I don't expect to play again in reality. But like I wouldn't put a label on it of being retired necessarily either.
Yeah. Do you feel like you still have the closure of what would be a retirement announcement? Even though I know you said you probably won't play, but in your head you're kind of like, oh, I'm probably done. Do you feel like you have a closure with it, kind of, or do you trying to not let that door close?
No, I think definitely this year was helped a lot by going back in and just struggling, like just really struggled with the load. The back might be okay, but a hamstring to give up or something else to give up, and yeah. So as opposed to last year, I found like going to watch me games this year a lot more comfortable, being like, okay, yeah, I've given. And I'm very happy that when I went in, I even like picked up a couple of injuries early on. I stayed disciplined, did my level best to try and get back out, and I did get. Ironically, I actually played 30 minutes of a challenge match against Antrim with my dad managing them, which was the last in an empty Park Tailteann was most likely my last time in the green jersey. But yeah, I felt like, well, look, you've given that a right shot, and it makes it a lot easier, and it can be quite cliched, but like when you look back and go, yeah, okay, throughout the vast majority of my career, I couldn't really look at any areas and say, oh, you held back a bit there, you didn't fully. That definitely makes it a bit easier. Certainly, you know, there's times you're watching, like say this Sunday, would you love to be involved? Yeah, the Leinster final was like a strange one because it was so, a few months previous you were kind of aiming towards that yourself, and it was such a big occasion. But definitely a lot more closure about it. Haven't gone back in.
Brilliant. I'm going to move on to the sideline seven. Very conscious of time. Shane, thanks a million. And we've had a
No
couple of
matter.
recording issues as well. It's the same 7 questions at the end of every episode. Shane, question 1, what's your favourite quote?
There's one I like. Everyone wants to win the race, but not many want to run the race. So yeah, we all love the idea of winning the championship or whatever it is, but it's the work that comes before that probably separates who really wants it.
I think that probably reflects on your piece around managing tomorrow of I'd love to be there, but the work that goes in and the level of training just, people don't see that. They don't see the behind the scenes.
Yeah, yeah, 100%. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Like it's you can't fake it at that level. And I say particularly for me, if you were like this really gifted scorer or something where you might be able to say, okay, we don't need you on the pitch every night of the week, but you will do this come game day. Yeah, you might be able to manage that. But say for me, my game was always based around fitness, work rate, all the rest. And if I'm not getting the miles up in training, you're just not gonna be able to offer that back.
Question 2, best sporting event you've been to. Pick one as a fan and one as a player that you've been involved in.
Um, as a fan, we had a really cool. Myself and my now wife went to an army college football game over in West
Oh,
Point.
unreal.
Yeah, yeah.
Very
So
good.
that was kind of ticked a few boxes for me in terms of interest, and it was just really cool. Like a lot of pageantry and probably a lot of like in your face patriotism, but really really cool event. We were lucky enough. Moira had done a year in New York some time back, and a girl she got friendly with, her brother was a cadet in West Point at the time, so the family brought us tailgating, full works. It's just really, yeah, and it's a really, really scenic setting. So, yeah, I go with that one kind of for its uniqueness. And then in terms of playing in, I mentioned earlier in 2021, we kind of got reasonably close to Dublin in a game where it was the first time there was a crowd back in Croke Park of any sort of significance. There was still maybe, I don't know if it was capped at 15 or 20,000. It wasn't a huge crowd, but for what we'd played in the previous like 18 months or so, it felt unbelievable, or maybe 12 months, whatever it was. It felt unreal, and we got a good run of momentum going in the second half, and you just felt this energy off it. So it was very disappointing, obviously, not to win, and it feels a little bit like I don't know, self-defeating to pick a game you lost, but just given, the weirdness of the atmospheres for a few years previously and or for the year previously rather, that was kind of a special one, yeah.
Yeah, it has a bit of meaning behind it as well, even though it was a loss.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Question three: biggest setback or challenge so far in your career, and how did you react to it?
Um, probably the second back surgery. I would say. Yeah, yeah. Like there would have been a bit of concern that like, are you a bit mad to be playing again here? Now that was from people who had your best interests at heart, but maybe weren't the medical experts. Like there wasn't a doctor or a physio working directly with me saying you shouldn't do this. So I'm not trying to make any heroic stance out of it or anything like that. But I had trouble getting back from the first one, and then once I did get back, I was good for a couple of years. So a bit daunting, like I suppose, knowing what was ahead of it. It's maybe a 3 or 4 month, but it's quite a rigid discipline recovery. And it also came off the back of I'd been overseas for a year, or 6 months rather, where I'd missed a bit with Meath. I'd struggled getting back into the team. Then I just got back in, did the back, and anyway, yeah. So that was a bit of a challenge, but uh, playing, I remember as soon as I was given like the likely timeline, I was like, okay, that kind of gets you back about 2 weeks before the first round of the club championship, which I managed to achieve, and we'd actually a really poor year with Dunboyne, but getting out playing those games, I was like, okay, geez, that was. And again, the reaction was just to be ultra disciplined with the rehab. Like I kind of saw that as my performance for that stage. So like, could I hit all these measures that the medical team were looking for me to do? Can I improve the quality of my single leg squat by whatever? So yeah, just kind of, I couldn't compete on the pitch. I couldn't do any of this, but can I master all these things just to get back to where I'd like to be?
Yeah, brilliant. Question four: on the flip side, then, your biggest achievement on or off the pitch?
Um, kind of had a busy 6 months or so there. We just bought a house there around March off the back of a wedding in November and starting a masters and all the rest. So maybe like getting into the house in the sort of culminating of all that and a brief flirtation back with the Meath team in the middle of it. So it was a busy couple of months, and getting into the house at the end of that felt like, and obviously it's not straightforward getting a house these days. So there was a bit of stress and all the rest involved with it. So getting in off the back of that was pretty satisfying. So I'll go with that certainly for an off the pitch one. Yeah.
Brilliant. Question five: what advice would you give your 18-year-old self?
I think I touched on this a little bit earlier. So I mentioned like kind of the bottleneck of underage people going through what was deemed hard enough work to get to that point won't be hard enough work going forward. So if you want to keep going on that trajectory, as I say, I would have thought like as a minor, I probably worked really, really hard and probably in your top couple of percent. And then you think what you're doing there is enough until you realize, okay, all these people are passing me by, and it takes you a while to maybe mature and go, okay, that was enough for that, and you just need to push it on a little bit more. So that's probably it. Yeah.
Yeah, I heard a basketball coach say, I think he's involved in NBA level kind of players, and he was like, "What got you here won't get you there." I think it was like
Yeah.
college players, and that was a couple of years ago. I heard it. It really struck a chord as well.
Yeah, and
Question.
I probably should have got a bit of an insight from Darrell Lenihan, schoolmate of mine. He went to Blackburn when we were about 17 or so. And I said, oh, well done. You finally, he kind of flirted with a few teams contract wise and hadn't happened from about 15 on. I said, oh, well done. You finally got there. And he said, no, no, it's getting there is the easy part. It's the next part. And
Very
I
good.
wish I had heeded his advice then. Yeah.
Very good. Question six: dream dinner guest and why? And you can make it a dinner party if you want.
Um, No, there's one fella I think I'll go with. I've read a bit and listened to a good bit of his podcast. A guy called Malcolm Gladwell. He's kind of like
Yeah,
a
class.
sociologist. I don't know exactly what you'd even label him as,
I don't know
but
either. It's funny when
yeah.
you yeah.
But like some of his books are brilliant and his podcast. And I think what he does really, really well in kind of the era of like outrage where you're on one side or the other and there's no middle ground. I think he's brilliant at taking quite like sensitive topics and playing both sides of it in a really, really articulate, really thought out way where, he'd be very thought provoking. I'd say you'd be exhausted after a conversation with him because I'd imagine there's like no small talk.
Yeah.
Everything's and he can bring. I love the way he that revisionist history podcast he used to have, he'd take like a really abstract scenario and relate it to business, sports, whatever, politics. Yeah, I think he's just a really, really interesting guy. Far more intelligent than me, and I probably feel intelligent when I listen to him. But he explains things in a very, I don't know, a very relatable way. And as I said, I think in particular he manages that balance and discourse really well, which is, I don't know if it's Twitter driven or what, but you can't. It seems so hard to have a measured conversation about anything kind of hot topic anymore, and he just seems to do it really, really well.
Totally. Yeah, it's a great shout. Have you listened to Johnny Wilkinson on the High Performance podcast?
I've I did was the high performance one. I think it was. I've listened to a few of his things.
Yeah,
Yeah,
he's
yeah,
another deep thinker about. I think,
very deep.
yeah, I thought you'd enjoy his insights on things.
Yeah,
Yeah, he's cool.
yeah. He was very, very interesting. Yeah, hard to imagine how he's settled at any stage in his life. He just, yeah, yeah.
100%. Final question before I let you go. You've been very generous with your time, so thank you. If your life was a book, Shane, what chapter would this be called?
Oh, I don't know. Um, what would we call it? Getting on, maybe. Can't do it. Can't do what I'd like to do, so I'll call it getting on. Trying to maybe adapt to not being able to do all the things you would have liked to be doing.
Okay, very good. Well, look, best of luck with it and all the media and commentary stuff. Keep it up, and hopefully we'll see you on the side of the pitch again soon.
Cheers, Lauren. Thank you very much. Thanks for having me.